Maybe not you.
That's the appeal. It's like me. That's my appeal.
My problem is my wife.
Well, I guess what I mean is like, first thing, get you off the
How's everybody doing tonight?
Use the other one. That one's dying. You gotta turn it on. This is first day.
How's everybody doing tonight?
Good.
Food good? Excellent. Well, no one's clapping, so I'm assuming everyone's still busy eating. It's a good sign. But before we get too far into our food, with the recent events of today with Iran launching strikes directly to Israel, we don't have all the details, and for sure, the very first casualty of war will always be the truth. But with all casualties like this, there will be a tremendous amount of innocent civilians that are injured in the crossfire. So I would like to hold a moment of silence for all those individuals that have been injured within the last year from our last convention. So if you all take a moment of silence, we definitely appreciate it. Thank you all. Really appreciate it. God bless. Enjoy the food. Woo!
That was the one thing.
I would have liked to.
That was the one thing. And reaching people and being a good carrier of the message, and also and that was the like days. That was the thing that I was and then those ones and having someone who's done that for 3 years and a career to back it up. President, maybe it'll resonate with 20-something people. Not in the sense that I, put a lot of time and effort and energy to beating the ground.
Mild, and then my back got.
Didn't you sneak up there? I was trying to do it for the moment of silence. It's my boss. I'm just seeing it.
Walking into the hill with the bus.
I suppose you're right.
In 6 years.
Seven goals. And that's what we sold.
Well, it is true.
You agree with that?
I do it for you. Mr. What? Very small bottles.
Sure, okay, sure. And I don't know, I'm actually relatively ignorant of so, you know, behind the scenes. Sure.
One morning I had to wake him up out of his bed. I had to like sneak in his bed.
Here, drink this.
Quietly internal.
Yeah.
He never said it to the party. He never said it. He never said it to the He never said it to Libertarian leadership. He never said it to the
Like you showed up with,
you know,
there's
just
some
things like
trucking companies.
he never said that.
They don't piggyback the hour.
But someone decided
So
to suggest.
every
I know, I'm saying home
somewhere said to change the rate. Takes this to change the
Yeah, yes, it was good. That we were on stage. I enjoyed it very much. Yeah.
8 hours to truck drivers. Truck. Yep. Paid for 4 hours. So good man. One guy's going to get done at 6.
I noticed that right as you were able to snap the
That's tough. So much is going on. The house is hard. Part of the Civil War with the simultaneous collapse of currency. It's all going to get. Well, we have food. So everyone, I might get trapped. These are all go together. I don't know how to get you to good, Doug.
Oh, I heard.
See, I feel like we don't have sticks.
There's some very unique instances. You know,
Don't make it over. It will just fall back So we got an auditor down whose dad the living is so low. It looks like a fucking game. They have enough money left over They live over here, fenced off, like, 10-foot tall. Versus like it's they need a job. They need a job. They keep the fucking. And actually, see the machine, you know, they're really tired. Because that's all they can afford.
No, when that was happening, I went to like this first show was super small, like they didn't have it at all. Every one of them was dying to grab four of them. I guess that's why I don't like toilet paper, like it's I was slow.
I can still remember how you acted over toilet paper. This is why I struggle with my political philosophies, because you speak with me. But I remembered what you did with the TV.
Look, that day, so like the day that like they called it. Yeah, so that Saturday we were supposed to have a whole bunch of people over there. And I was joking like, you can have one square, I'm not allowed one square to everybody. If you use that, you're done. You can rule your squares, I don't care. You only get one. You know what's the funny thing too?
It's got a 1/4 inch of dust sitting on it.
What's funny too is like I always
load and a half and a 1/4 inch.
like my parents would like always run out of toilet paper, and it was just like it was awful, right? So I always made sure we had toilet paper. Like so I had like make sure the roll on the tube, one on the sink, and then a whole
I don't want one, thank you.
Okay, check 1 2, check 1 2. Are we live? Okay guys, we're going to get into the evening portion of things here. We've got some awards to give out, and we've got a candidate to hear from, and we've got a keynote address. So before I get into that though, why don't we put our hands together for the DoubleTree staff. They've been awesome this weekend. Everything's been fantastic. Thank you. We appreciate you listening. So every year we give out what's called the Early Bird Award, and it goes to the first person who purchased their ticket, the most ambitious among us. And this year it goes to Robert James Fulman.
All right.
And this is a Libertarian Gold Bird.
Wow. You're giving him the bird?
You got the bird.
He told me to make sure I registered on time, so I did. And I wrote him a bunch of stuff. Hey, the website doesn't work. Nothing's fuck. Everything's broken. He's like, I didn't even send the email. I'm like, you told me January 1st, so I wanted to make sure I got there.
You did provide some useful feedback. Thank you.
Thanks for being
actually, that's the reason I'm up here. We're gonna present 2 awards tonight, both of whom I nominated.
You're a little close.
It's not up, it's just,
A little
yeah.
far away.
Okay.
There we go.
Good evening, everyone. The Dave Harmon Award is presented at every convention to the outstanding libertarian who's a member of the Libertarian Party of Wisconsin. It's got a longer definition, I think, but I don't remember it, nor can I read right now, so please forgive me. But that in essence is who the award is for, what it's for. I nominated this year Nathan Gall. Now, to those of you who've been involved for a while, it might seem pretty self-evident why I would nominate him. But I want to tell you why I nominated him. Most libertarians can talk about libertarianism, belong to the party, talk a good game, work social media, whatever that is. We understand our ideas. That's generally why we're here. Not as many libertarians are good at taking care of business, of doing the things that are necessary to keep a party running or a convention happening. And Nate has been an absolute ace at that he tried to get out last year, for 8 years and now 9 years. Normally we might present a gift. Nate said he didn't want a gift for this award. That comes along with it. But my gift to him is, and I'm sure you'll all join me, is allowing him to coordinate next year's convention too. In all seriousness, Nate is an exemplary libertarian, has been a phenomenal member of the Libertarian Party of Wisconsin, pretty much as long as I've been involved. He's a sound human being in a way that I can't possibly describe to you if I stood up here all night. He's a father, a business owner, he's a great libertarian, and he's also, if you've been a member of the Libertarian Party of Wisconsin on the executive committee, often the person that raises the point during the meeting clarifying something or dissenting on something that the rest of us didn't think about. And I've often bragged in those meetings about, I will never vote against Nate, and I don't know that I ever have, because he's usually bringing up such a fantastic point, something that I or other people on the meeting didn't think about. And that value, not only being fearless at such a young age, at least when he started, how old were you when you first started coordinating the convention?
25.
That's very young, an infant basically. I'm very proud to be associated with him. I'm very proud of the role that he's had on the executive committee, on coordinating the convention, and just being the kind of libertarian that is useful in every single way possible to us, to the Libertarian Party of Wisconsin, and to our world. So I congratulate Nate Gall.
I take great pride in being a part of this organization and affiliated with all of you. And it's not because we have the best principles, although we do, and it's not because we throw great parties, though we do. It is all of you. It's everyone in this room. It's every one of my friends who has had my back when I've needed you. The mentors that I draw inspiration from. My wife, who can't be here, but she encourages me every day to be the best man that I can. I'm honored to know every one of you. Thank you.
Love you, Nate.
When I told him I'd nominate him, I told him I was the one that was going to cry.
That's why I told him
But
to.
I'm not going to. Let the record
Once you
show.
have kids, you become more emotional.
As far as I know, Nate didn't make any mistakes in the convention until this year when he forgot to put our campaign's ad.
We got the alien too.
He forgot the
The
alien.
alien.
There's no alien.
Wasn't
We'll make it right. We'll put 2 next to it.
there that screw up on the ballot book?
Our next award
Yeah, there's a few might.
is the
Nitpicking though.
Yeah, now let's look at the report now.
The Ed Thompson Liberty Award. You all know who Ed Thompson was?
Oh yeah.
He was the the brother of Governor Tommy Thompson, ran as a Libertarian in 2006. Correct? 2002? Thanks, the old timers are correcting back there. Thanks, Tom. And now we have an award in his honor as somebody who's outside of the Libertarian Party of Wisconsin, but who does exemplary work on issues that we really care about. And this year, I nominated our award winner, who I'm introducing right now. I'm not going to say her name yet. It's not time yet, Ann. I'm not done talking.
You got a half an hour now.
There'll be less than that. This is an issue, as you heard me introduce and sponsor the resolution today, to call for our support of House Resolution 934, which would end the persecution of Julian Assange and basically the persecution of the First Amendment. I draw that inspiration from Ann Batista, who's receiving our award tonight. Her resume, more or less, a part of it anyway, is in your workbook, and hopefully you read it. But if you know anything about her, if you follow that issue at all, she works day and night. You texted me at 3:35 in the morning, or emailed me at 3:35 in the morning asking about the particulars about this event. I don't know when she sleeps, but she cares passionately about this issue. And it's an issue we should all care passionately about, as I've explained earlier, and I'm not going to re-explain. But she is an inspiration for me. She's out there fighting for this issue that is essential to the liberty that we aspire to have in the United States and across the world. The ability for us to know what our government is doing and not have our government actively suppressing and persecuting people that tell the truth about what they're doing is essential to be informed voters. Even for us, even if you're an anarchist, you have to be able to identify the problem. And unfortunately, well still, even anarchists rely on other people telling them what's going on, unless you're an anarchist and you're in the CIA already or something. I don't know how that would work. Maybe Bob can answer that. It's essential. The work that she does is essential. The fact it should be, on my campaign, it's like issue number 1. I'm involved with it. I've sent out postcards. Hopefully Ann has got all of you to send postcards to your House of Representatives, the representative tonight. I encourage you to do, on this issue and others, find people that work on these issues. It might be Assange First Amendment issues, it might be Second Amendment issues, it could be peace, whatever it is. Reach out beyond the constraints and the confinements of this party, of this group, of your own affiliates or whatever, and find people who agree with us on even single individual issues, could be cannabis, whatever it is. Connect with them. That's how we get more libertarians. That's how we get more people in this party. That's how we get more people that will find their way to our core ideals and not be off there agreeing with us on some things, but somehow getting sucked into the statism of the two big parties. That's how we do it, is by connecting with people. And that's what I did with Ann. In the course of my campaign, I went to the Peace Action Office to watch the Rage Against the War Machine rally in February of last year. Ann was there, and I met her, and we've been working together more or less ever since. She's working tirelessly. I'm doing a bunch of other stuff, but the fact that she is receiving this award should be a source of pride, not only to her, I would hope, but also to the rest of us, that there are people out there that are doing this work that's so vitally important. So on behalf of the Libertarian Party of Wisconsin, I'd like to award the Ed Thompson Liberty Award to Ann Batista. Just for a few minutes, because she could and would be justified in going for a while about it, but she probably won't.
Thank
You need a photo op or something? I don't know.
Do we need some photos?
There we need some photos.
Who's taking pictures?
I didn't bring my big camera.
Where's Kevin?
Thank you.
I couldn't possibly have said enough.
Oh my gosh.
Hang it right above your desk.
Lovely. It's lovely.
You got me
Close enough here. So, I want to thank all of you very much for conferring this honor on me on behalf of Julian Assange, really. And Phil, in particular, I want to thank you for not only for nominating me, but Phil is amazing. I mean, he took on 2 boxes of 435 postcards and was able to send them to all members of the House of Representatives twice with, and I'm sure you enlisted some people to help you with that. And later, I'll talk a little bit about this postcard, so you can send your postcard in as well. But first I want to say Julian Assange is the most important publisher of the 21st century. But nonetheless, he remains in Belmarsh prison in the UK just over 5 years as of Thursday. And you might ask, well, why is he there? Of course, we never hear anything about him. Relatively, rarely do we hear anything about him. As Salon said earlier this month, and it's really unusual for him to make mainstream publications, Salon said the US government hounds him because at the end of the day, our government doesn't want its dirty little or big secrets aired. And they continued, the Australian Parliament, several members of Congress, the German Chancellor, and others across the world have pleaded with the US government to drop its case against him. Those dirty little and big secrets include evidence of US war crimes. Dirty secrets the Pentagon war machine has kept hidden. They include evidence of torture and murder of prisoners by our Iraqi allies. Evidence of cold-blooded murder of an entire family, extended family, grandparents, aunts and uncles, little small children. And then this by our US soldiers, and then calling in an airstrike to hide the evidence. Evidence of 15,000 civilians whose deaths were never recorded. In Afghanistan, Task Force 373 was revealed by WikiLeaks to have killed men extrajudicially in nighttime raids without trial or warning, often fingered by their Mujahideen enemies with scores to settle. And of course, there were many children and women killed at the same time, collateral damage. According to The Guardian, the term Task Force 373 never appeared in any military official reports. Khalid al-Masri was a joint, I believe, Lebanese and German citizen who was picked up by the CIA, sodomized on the first night he was picked up, rendered to various torture sites until they figured out that they had picked up the wrong person. Then they set him loose in Albania, telling him, and it was the middle of the night, and they said, just walk away. And of course he thought he was going to be killed. He wasn't. But when he went back to Germany and he tried to get justice for what had been done to him, he couldn't. And then WikiLeaks, in one of their documents that was revealed, showed that the United States government had contacted the German government to say, do not send out arrest warrants for these CIA agents. It won't be good for our intergovernmental relationship. And because of the WikiLeaks document, what WikiLeaks does is provide documents that provide evidence so that they can be used in a court of justice to render justice for all of these injustices, not just in the United States, but around the world. But many Americans know nothing about Assange except that what? He's a hacker, he's a rapist, and he didn't take care of his cat. The media have repeated every ridiculous lie fed to them by the intelligence community. Many of these lies were contradicted by witness testimony under oath at his 2020 trial, but of course the media, other than Computer Weekly, did not cover the trial. In February, the absurdity of this case was exposed by a hearing in February, which again, they tried not to let people, it's supposed to be a public hearing. Only people in England and Wales could sign on to a video feed, and of course there were very few places, like a handful, available for the public in the actual courtroom. People from the United States, people from Australia, I applied to, sign on to that video feed. I was not allowed to do so. Phil, I don't know if you applied to sign on?
Yeah, I didn't get it.
You did. And many people in Milwaukee, tried to get the video feed, and we were all denied. But that's what they do. They keep everything in the dark. And this hearing in February was a hearing to determine whether his lawyers could appeal on 9 different grounds. And one ground for appeal that his lawyers put before the court was that there was evidence that the government had discussed plans to kidnap or assassinate him, and there's actually witness testimony for that in the trial, and therefore he could not get a fair trial. So in the Kafkaesque farce that every one of these trials has been, the judges concluded that once he was in U.S. custody, there would no longer be a reason to kidnap or assassinate him, and so therefore that ground of appeal was not going to be allowed as a ground for appeal in his case. The judges decided that in fact there were 3 grounds on which his lawyers might appeal. But in making that decision, they also told the government exactly what they could say in order to provide assurances that those 3 grounds could disappear. And they said if the U.S. just submits assurances that contradict what the U.S. prosecutor stated under oath, or it was a U.S. prosecutor, but represented, of course, by a U.K. barrister. But the prosecutor statements were what they were always referring to. His name is Kronberg. So what the U.S. prosecutor stated under oath during the trial, if they just contradicted that, then it would be fine, and then they could extradite him to the United States. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Given the way the series of trials have gone, it's unlikely that Biden will want to have another reason for young people not to vote for him. And it's young people, I think, who are most aware of the fact that Julian Assange is a publisher, and this represents something that will destroy press freedom in the United States. So I think it's likely the UK judges will accept some of his assurances, but find at least one ground in which to allow an appeal in the UK. And what that means is that then there will be probably a trial in the fall. It will go at least until they won't get a decision on it until after 2025. It will have avoided any messiness with the election. And that's the way this thing has played out. It is punishment by process. It's been going on for 5 years. And imagine how much we actually hear about this case in the news. It's very little. So there are many, many abuses in this case, and many of them are listed on this card that I brought with me, and that Phil sent out over 1,000 of these. The abuse, this card is asking a representative. I'm hoping each one of you will send one to your representative, and I have the materials here, you can do that. It's asking the representative to support House Resolution 934, that, thank you very much for endorsing that, that would set him free. And it states, it says, it's preposterous to imagine a country that spied on Mr. Assange's conversations with his lawyers, stole the contents of his lawyers' computers and phones, elicited false testimony against him that now has been recanted, and plotted to kidnap or assassinate him, could possibly provide him with a fair trial in this country. So I hope that I have a stack of these cards at my place over here, and I have stamps and addresses, and I hope you'll be able to fill one out during the evening, and I'll be happy to mail those for you. But I want you to understand, this is a political case. This is about our ability to know what our government is doing in our names with our tax dollars, and not just us, but our children and our grandchildren. So I'm asking, please contact your representative, ask that they sign on to House Resolution 934. And I want to thank you very, very much. I'm going to prize this award. It's really lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you for caring about civil liberties. Free Julian Assange. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. So true, so true. Good evening, you know my name, my name's Tim Krend, in case anybody showed up late. What a weekend, what a day, what a convention. And we have more to come. We have two speakers yet to go tonight. Our keynote will take the stage in a bit. He is Patrick McFarland. But first, we'll hear from a presidential candidate who showed up today, Mr. Mike Tremont. You all have this at your table. It's got his bio. You can read it, or he can talk about it. I want to say this. Perfect storm is coming. We need the Libertarian Party in our message, really for this world, because it's not looking good. But there's still hope, and we can actually retrieve so much if the Libertarian Party could become the People's Party that we all need it to be. Mike is an economist, a libertarian with campaign experience, and he is also someone I've gotten to know over here the last year since I met him. He's very articulate. He looks like he's been run for president. He wants to be president. He wants to be the Libertarian Party candidate for president. And that might be the avenue that could break through. It's a very competitive race in the party. So let's hear Mike, and for those delegates, pay attention and feel free to do some Q&A later or whenever it suits you. And we hope to go to Washington and decide the future of the Libertarian Party of America in all ways and shapes and forms. So let me introduce Mr. Mike Tremont.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me spend this time with you, and thank you for giving Ann this award. What she had to say was so incredibly important. It is true that the First Amendment is the lead-off of our Constitution, and there's a reason for that. And it turns out that if you didn't know the reason for that 200 years ago, you damn well know what it is now. Our government is run by a class of ruling people, elected politicians and bureaucrats who operate in the shadows. They operate in the shadows for a very rational reason. They know damn well that they operate with a set of principles and values that do not align with yours. They do not take actions that align with your interests. They behave in a way that brings power to themselves, that leads to self-aggrandizement, that consolidates authority with the government itself. This is not what you would do if you were running the government. That's how you know that they operate with a set of values that does not align with yours. If you were in government, you would have not invaded Afghanistan, you would not have invaded Iraq, you would not have killed over 1 million people. Let that sink in. This is not a way in which you would behave. You would not run a government that resulted in $34 trillion of debt. The reason you would not do this is not necessarily because you're so good at mathematics. The reason you would not do this is because your values are different than that. You realize it is not an ethical proposition to take money from men and women around the United States, forcibly, by the way, and use it to project military hegemony in weird places around the globe. You would not use that money to project foreign aid in the Middle East. We can talk about what's going on today later on. You would not pass on to your children and to your grandchildren over $100,000 of debt per capita. You would not run a monetary policy based on the following, and this is weird, so take it from me as a professional economist. If we say nothing else tonight, let me tell you that being an economist on a professional basis in Washington, D.C. is a very strange thing. Let this sink in. The most important price in the world is the interest rate in the US dollar. Do you know how we set it? I know you do. Every 6 weeks, we lock up 12 people in a single room and we ask what mood they're in. That is not a metaphor. That's literally how it works. If I told you that that's how we set bread prices in Switzerland, you would say, that's weird. I don't think it's a good idea. But if I told you it's how we set interest rates for the whole world on the most important commodity on the planet, the only international reserve currency that we have, you would probably say, Mike, that's bullshit. Well, it is, but it happens to be the truth. The great battle of the past 100 years has been the tension between this ruling class of individuals who operate in the shadows. Good on you. Don't make me cry. Good on you. On the one hand. And on the other hand, everybody else. That's a weird thing. Everybody else in America is on the other side. Let that sink in. You would not behave that way if you were in charge. You define America the way I do. A faith in individual responsibility, personal freedom, an expectation of privacy, personal responsibility. You recognize the importance of a faith in free enterprise, a belief in entrepreneurial growth. These ideas are utterly, irreconcilably incompatible with an expansionary state. This tension is not going to go away. This has been the battle of the past 100 years. I don't know if the following is the good news or the bad news. This will not be the battle of the next 100 years. This battle is coming to a head. It's coming to a head because the federal government of the United States, the most powerful organization ever created, is about to fail. There is no conceivable way that the federal government of the United States will continue on its current path past the middle of this century. I say that not because I'm so good at predicting things. I thought that George Herbert Walker Bush was going to win the White House in '92. I thought his son was going to lose in '96. The reason I say this and the reason I know this is not because I have all kinds of university degrees. It's because I can add. There are things that can accelerate the process, but the only way to put off the financial collapse of the U.S. government is if we change course dramatically. We need to cap spending. We need to end the welfare state, completely, fundamentally change entitlement programs. We need to change the policy by which we set monetary policy. We need to change foreign policy. We need to make fundamental changes. Who is going to do that? If you are waiting for a Republican to lead the charge back toward a government of delimited powers, you're waiting for something that's not going to happen. And I don't say that because I wish it were true or because I'm mad at Republicans. I grew up a Republican, maybe some of you did. The Republican Party and I went in two very, very different directions. If you're waiting for a Democratic politician to stand up for your individual liberties, to stand up for the First Amendment, sadly, you're waiting for something that's not going to happen. Most of the members of my family are Democrats. They joined that party because they did believe that that party would stand up for your First Amendment rights. All the other weird things I'm going to say, let this one sink in. When my mother joined the Democratic Party, they would stand up for your Second Amendment rights. Youngsters, ask someone at your table with gray hair. That's a weird thing. If you're waiting for the Democratic Party to lead that charge, if you're waiting for the Republican Party to stand up for what it used to, fiscal conservatism, a belief in free markets, free trade, a deregulated environment, competitiveness among the states to attract investment capital. These are the reasons why people join the Republican Party. It's the reason I joined the Republican Party in the 90s. We went in two very, very different directions. This is why we have such a huge opportunity in 2024 as a Libertarian Party. We all understand that. Well, that and the fact that each one of those parties is about to nominate someone who's a little bit strange. It's a family program. We're trying to be nice here. We all understand why it's a huge opportunity in 2024. But I'd like to argue that there's something much more important at foot. This is not merely an opportunity. This is an obligation. This is a call to duty for us. We have to get this right. No one else is going to do it. We as libertarians, and look around the room about how many of us there. We're lucky to have this many. This is a great convention. By the way, I'm the world's leading authority on Libertarian Party conventions now. That's a great thing too. This is a good group. It's a fun group. You guys haven't punched each other in the face yet. You got multiple tables full of good food. This is what we call an excellent convention. Multiply this by 50, it's still not a large number of people, is it? By the standards of changing the world, it's not a huge number of people. But it is up to us. We, as libertarians, we are the philosophical descendants of the people that wrote the Declaration of Independence, that put together our Constitution, that created the federal government of the United States. Why? Only one legitimate reason: stand up for your individual liberties. Nobody sails across the North Atlantic in the 18th century for anything less. It is up to us. Understand that the value and the meaning of the Libertarian Party nationally, the value of that brand is approximately zero. Any of you run for local office? I know you have. Spend most of your time explaining what the Libertarian Party is. Most Americans can't spell libertarianism. But most Americans have a libertarian streak. Most Americans are waking up to the idea that public policy is behind much of the fundamental problems we have in this country. This is a huge opportunity for us at the same time as being our call to duty. To fulfill on that obligation, I believe that we need to do a couple of things differently than we have in the past, and that's the reason why I'm in the race. Thank you for asking me earlier. Number one, we have to run a platform that is completely principled. I know you heard from Jacob last night. He's on board with this. You know I know that. Jacob and I agree on this. We have some disagreements. We haven't punched each other in the face, neither of you guys. But he's right. We need to run a completely differentiated platform. This is the way to correctly brand our party. It's the ethical thing to do. It's also the correct thing to do for the value of our party brand, for the purposes of getting the most attention possible. There are those in our party who incorrectly say that there is some choice to be made between reaching out to the maximum number of voters on the one hand, or running a principled platform on the other. It's not the case. To be successful, even if you define success as nothing more than getting votes and raising money and getting media attention, even if that's your bellwether, the right thing to do is to differentiate from the Republican Party, to cleave a hard edge against the Democratic Party. This we have not done in the past. And I believe that our mistake in not having done that in the past has contributed mightily to the fact that our party brand is valued at approximately zero. I have stood in enough Walmart parking lots to learn that that's the truth. The second thing that we need to do that's completely different than the way we have in the past is compete. Compete credibly. To compete credibly means we have to do a couple of things different tactically and strategically. We have to run with a whole lot of credibility to back up all those transformational ideas. Consider the following. If your platform was, I think inflation's naughty, I don't like it, you could probably get away with saying that and no one's going to give you a hard time, right? I'm pretty sure a 12-year-old could say that in a Walmart parking lot and get away with it. If, on the other hand, you say, we need to fundamentally change monetary policy, we need to get rid of the Federal Reserve System, we need to replace it for the sake of the dollar, not replacing the dollar, not killing off the dollar. By the way, we do need competitive currencies, don't get me wrong. We need to replace our discretionary monetary policy by getting rid of the Federal Reserve System, lock, stock, and barrel, and for a variety of reasons. And I know it's a lift. If that's your platform, you better be able to back that bad boy up. That's why I'm in this race as a professional economist. On the other hand, if you say, what's our best example? Back the blue all the time, or defund the police. These are two different ways of saying police reform is too hard, I don't get it. On the other hand, if your policy includes fundamentally changing the criminal justice system, ending the war on drugs, sunsetting qualified immunity, yes, creating competition for police agencies, holding police officers accountable, and beating police unions to the punch. If this is your platform, you better be able to back that up. When a cop says it's different, I was on the road for 11 and a half years from the age of 49 to 60 when I was done being a professional economist. I piss off a lot of cops, but you know what? Most cops agree with me. They won't say it in public. If you're a police officer, you know damn well who's in that locker room that shouldn't be. And nobody wants to take a pay cut for that schmuck. That's how to get to police officers. That's the truth. That's why I'm in the race. We can make a difference, but we need to recognize that we need to do things differently than we have in the past. So I'm asking for you to join me and to let me join you, because this is a team effort. You know that politics is a team sport. You know that the reason I'm in it is for down ballot candidates, for branding, for the future. And you know that I know why you're in it. Because we're standing up not for you and not for me. We're standing up for people who are not in this room, people who can't spell libertarianism, but need representation nonetheless. Make no mistake, this is for them, but it's our call of duty. Thanks a lot.
We have time for a couple of Q&A. Does anybody have any questions? Jeffrey?
Do we have a microphone or?
No, just go ahead.
Jeffrey, we can hear you in Milwaukee.
Okay. Jeffrey Buntrock from Door County. When I was a youngster, about 35 years ago, I attended business school in St. Gallen, Switzerland.
Well done.
And you just made an oblique reference to the Swiss way of doing things. Could you please elaborate on that a little bit?
Which aspect did you find so Swiss?
Well, your views on economics and the Federal Reserve System.
Yeah.
And you're well acquainted with the financial turmoil which happened with the major banks in Switzerland. It didn't quite spill over to the Swiss National Bank, but they rescued them.
I
So
totally get it. I appreciate that.
you get the point.
I got out of
Okay.
business school about 150 years ago myself, and then it was another 40 years until I went to graduate school, and that was only 90 years ago, so I understand. I was brought up in the Austrian school of thought, in a sense, at the George Washington University that I attended, where I worked my way through school by teaching. We were in what was a descendant of the Chicago school, which is, of course, a descendant of the Austrian school.
Ron Paul.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
The reason that Dr. Paul talked so much about ending the Federal Reserve System is not because it's an easy issue, right? It's not because most Americans have ever even heard of the Federal Reserve System. By the way, I apologize for my RFK voice tonight. I normally don't use a microphone, but it feels good to have a little projection here, so thanks for being patient with me. Last night, Michael Rectenwald and Chase Oliver, we were all yelling at each other for a couple of hours, and there seems to be a little bit of hangover. The reason Dr. Paul spent so much time talking about it is because it's so damned important and because it's fundamental to the way that our economy operates. Were it not for the Federal Reserve System, the American government would not have so much access to funding and would not be able to perform so many stupid actions in the dark. And don't make me cry. Thank you for everything you do. This is an oblique way for the government to raise money without, not only without making any announcements or getting any political approval, but not even being on the books about it, right? This is a quasi-private, quasi-public institution that's able to acquire U.S. government-issued debt without your approval or anybody else's, and in that sense, it's a bank for the U.S. government, and this is the reason why, of course, our forefathers, who were libertarians, after all, were so opposed to creating a central bank in the first place. So I hope that gets to, I hope I haven't offended your question, but I think that that's what you were getting to. Another question, Michael?
You and I talked earlier this evening, Michael.
Thank you for that.
About, I'm switching gears a little bit here. I want to talk about the party.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about how out of sync we are in our national presidential election process, which is putting us behind the 8 ball in competing against the Democrats and the Republicans.
Yeah, it's a problem. I got 2 things to say about it, and neither one is going to sound like a silver bullet, right? Number one, we need to start, your idea was to start about 3 years from now. I totally agree. We need to conclude this aspect, the primary race, if you will, we need to conclude the determination of who our presidential candidate is going to be at least a year before the summertime when the Republicans and the Democrats are in full swing, right? It takes us so long to raise money. Republicans and Democrats raise dozens of millions of dollars in the primary. That's not going to happen for us, and therefore I think that we need a year head start. My understanding is that the political leadership of our party wants to begin in something like January next time, which is a lot better than it is now. But I would agree with those who say it needs to start even earlier than that. The other thing that I have to say about this that is not going to sound like a silver bullet either is that for this year, which is most relevant to me personally, we need to come out of the box spending a whole lot of money we don't have. In other words, we need to change the game a little bit from waiting for money to come in to spending money we don't have. And that means someone's going to have to take a mortgage against someone's house. And not all of the people that are going to be taking mortgages against their house are aware of this yet. Michael. Some people that might be able to hear my voice right now are going to be figuring out ways of raising money that they haven't quite thought of yet. You and I will talk later. We are going to come out of the box in June with borrowed money, spending hard and loud, differentiating our message right away. The reason for this is not because I'm just a crazy dude who likes to live on the edge, which may also be true. That's not the reason, though. The reason is because we need to differentiate ourselves as quickly as possible, because that's the secret to raising money. If you have $3 million to spend, as we did in the last cycle, dribbling it out over 5 months is exactly the wrong strategy. It doesn't do you any good to flame out late. If people don't like your message, you better figure that out when it's still warm outside. If you're waiting until October, there's a problem. We're going to come right out of the box with the pay-to-play media, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars of borrowed money, because we have to. Because we have to. It's that important, by the way. That's how important this is. All right, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
And time for the main event. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Patrick McFarland. Our keynote speaker for tonight is someone that might be familiar to many of you who follow the anti-war and foreign policy movements. Patrick McFarland. Patrick lives in Wisconsin and is a criminal defense and family law attorney. He is the Justin Raimondo Fellow at the Scott Horton's Libertarian Institute, where he advocates a non-interventionist foreign policy. His podcast, Vital Dissent, exposes establishment narratives in foreign policy with well-researched documentary content and insightful guest interviews. His work has appeared on antiwar.com, the Ron Paul Institute, and Zero Hedge. Please join me in welcoming Patrick McFarland.
All right, everybody, thank you. I really appreciate that introduction, and I hope I live up to the main event here this evening. Is this locked here?
Working on it. Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm projecting. That looks good. Am I coming through the speakers here?
Good. Might be. Was it dead?
Check 1, 2. There it is. Okay.
It's gotta be a little closer.
A little bit closer. Okay. Well, first off, I'd like to thank Tom Leary and Tim Krenz for the opportunity to speak here tonight. I really do appreciate it. It's a great honor for me. I'd also like to say hi to my son, Thomas, who I understand is up late past his bedtime watching on the live stream. So hopefully he doesn't stay up too late tonight. So on March 19th, 2003, on the eve of Iraq War II, the late great Justin Raimondo of antiwar.com hunched over a keyboard with his brow furrowed, with a cigarette jutting from his iconic scowl, and punched out a polemic called Shine Perishing Republic. Raimondo's piece, of course, was hearkening back to the 1925 anti-imperialist poem of the same name by a poet named Robinson Jeffers. Shine Perishing Republic lamented America's departure from the old republic. And that poem tied together many of the themes that libertarians know all too well. Everyone sitting in this room here tonight knows it, that empire abroad leads to loss of liberty at home. And as a part of that piece, Justin Raimondo wrote, as the sand in the hourglass runs down and the Grim Reaper gets ready for harvest time in Iraq, I think of the poetry of Robinson Jeffers and of the poet himself, a difficult man, serenely alienated from the world of his time, whose poems echo down through the years like the voice of some forgotten prophet who got it all right, too right. He was bitterly opposed to World War II. In describing his president, he wrote of, quote, the cripple's power, need of Roosevelt. Jeffers' bitterness was turned into a thing of beauty when he put pen to paper. And this is what Jeffers wrote in this poem. And I think we should keep all this in mind as the news came tonight that Iran has hit Israel with rocket strikes and drone strikes as well. And we're possibly being drugged into another conflagration. Jeffers wrote, while this America settles in the mold of its vulgarity, heavily thickening to empire, and protest only a bubble in the molten mass pops and sighs out, and the mass hardens, I sadly smiling remember that the flower fades to make fruit, the fruit rots to make earth. Out of the mother and through the spring exultances, ripeness and decadence, and home to the mother. You making haste on decay, not blameworthy, life is good, be it stubbornly long or suddenly. A mortal splendor, meteors are not needed less than mountains. Shine Perishing Republic. So like Jeffers, Raimondo had a way of turning aggressively dissident anti-war editorializing into an art form, one that tied an encyclopedia of facts together with culture, literature, and scathing wit, because we all need more of that. Raimondo, of course, is a large influence on my activism personally, as America continues plummeting into the imperial abyss. It is the death spiral of America's post-Cold War unipolar moment, something that the neoconservatives hubristically called the end of history. For the last 12 years, I've witnessed this death spiral as I've grown up in the liberty movement. I'm 30 years old today, well, not today, but this year, which is crazy to think about. And I'm sure a lot of people in this room who are a bit older than that might kind of scoff at that. But it's true, 30 is a big number for me. As a college freshman at the University of Minnesota, I fell in love with the 2012 Ron Paul presidential campaign. Maybe a lot of you folks can relate to that, and people listening at home. After graduation, I continued on to law school at Mitchell Hamlin and St. Paul. And during my 2L year, I was 23 years old. I was a full-time law student. I had just gotten married. I was a law clerk at the Public Defender's Office in Anoka County. And I was editing for a school publication, you know, writing things about how we just need to decriminalize all drugs and how we need to replace the police with private security firms, which some of my law professors found interesting. But I think they just found it interesting. I thought it'd be a great idea with all those things on my plate to start a weekly podcast. And I think I have Tom Woods to blame for that, along with a lot of people. So in February 2018, I found something called the Libertarian Institute, and I wrote them an email asking if I could post my podcast there. And they said yes. But somehow I didn't know that. At the time, I didn't know that Scott Horton was the director of the Institute, and it was him that said yes to allowing me to post my content on the Institute. And I've been there ever since. So In 2018, a year later, I graduated from law school and I passed the bar exam and started practicing. Now I have my own law firm. It's a solo practice and I mostly do criminal defense and family law. I have no idea how, but during that time I've managed to continue my activism alongside this career. And also through that, 8 years of happy marriage to my lovely wife, and she's given me 3 wonderful boys, one of which I hope is watching right now. Like many people, becoming a father really made me worry about what kind of country and nation that my boys are going to grow up in. Now, the Biden administration says that that nation is the leader of something called, quote, the rules-based international order. I don't know if you guys have heard of this term. The idea being that the United States is uniquely entitled to enforce neoconservative and neoliberal progressive democratic hegemony across the world. Of course, in practice, we all know what this looks like and what it means. It means destroying the Middle East. It means killing over 1 million Iraqis. It means being in Afghanistan for over 20 years and then having the entire country just collapse, the government that we spent the last 20 years propping up. And it happened in like a week. It means NATO expansion. It means provoking and fighting proxy wars against the world's largest nuclear power. It means confronting China on China's doorstep. It means funding and arming Israel in what the International Court of Justice says could plausibly be classified as an ongoing genocide. And tonight we're seeing what that bears fruit, what fruit that bears. The war with Iran that the United States has wanted and has provoked for the last 20 or 30 years. All of this comes at the risk of entangling the United States in a regional or even a world war. And with all this imperial hubris lies the contradiction that Raimondo underscored in his piece, Shine Perishing Republic. What kind of libertarian vision does one enforce at the point of a gun? And what kind of liberty is left for the shooter after the trigger is pulled? Our glorious leaders repeatedly bandy about the official boilerplate, human rights in a free, open, and fair world. That's something that came from the mouth of Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Often this comes in the context of criticizing perceived authoritarianism abroad in other countries. None of our business. There's no clearer demonstration of this contradiction than the crisis that is currently facing the American justice system. And of course, meanwhile, at home, we're struggling on a massive scale to guarantee our citizens their most basic American liberties. 2 years ago, in 2022, Wisconsin suffered national embarrassment when a group of criminal defendants in Brown County, Wisconsin, filed a class action civil rights lawsuit against Governor Evers. And their claim was that Governor Evers failed to appoint them legal counsel when they were facing criminal prosecution. The complaint begins. The United States Constitution and the Wisconsin Constitution guarantee that people accused of crimes have the right to the assistance of an attorney for their defense. The U.S. Supreme Court has recognized that this right to counsel is, quote, a bedrock principle that constitutes the very foundation of our adversarial legal system of criminal justice. The Wisconsin Supreme Court has emphasized that, quote, the right to counsel in criminal proceedings is a fundamental constitutional right and a cornerstone of our justice system. Because lawyers in criminal courts are necessities and not luxuries. The United States Constitution and the Wisconsin Constitution require Wisconsin to appoint counsel to indigent defendants within a reasonable time after the defendant's initial appearance. Likewise, the Wisconsin legislature passed a set of laws that were supposed to, quote, provide for a prompt determination of indigency and appoint a public defender. And prompt means without undue delay. Indeed, the Wisconsin Supreme Court has, quote, condemned delays in the appointment of counsel that take longer than 10 to 14 days, consistently finding such delays to be unreasonable. But Wisconsin consistently takes longer than 14 days to provide counsel to indigent criminal defendants. This failure to provide timely legal representation is a statewide problem, according to the complaint. And it's admitted that it will take years to clear a backlog of roughly 35,000 cases. Now, this lawsuit was filed 2 years ago, so they were kind of dealing with, the fallout from COVID and all that kind of stuff. But this is a systematic problem that preceded COVID-19. Now, this complaint that was filed in Brown County was an astounding 418 pages long. And the reason it was so long is because the plaintiffs attached a 388-page spreadsheet listing thousands of individual criminal defendants that were awaiting the appointment of an attorney. Now, not all those folks were sitting in jail, but many of them were. A lot of them were released on bond, but they were released on bond sitting there. I don't know if any of you are facing criminal prosecution, but for a lot of my clients, criminal prosecution is the most important thing going on in their lives. I mean, I spoke with someone here today before who was facing felony prosecution, and he said that his case was waiting 4 years with the felony prosecution hanging over your head. It's unacceptable. Now, this complaint was 418 pages long, but the kicker is that the 388 pages that were just the spreadsheet of people waiting for attorneys, that was only defendants from 25 of Wisconsin's 72 counties. So that should put it into perspective for all of you. Now, as an advocate of liberty and a criminal defense attorney, I have a little bit of perspective on this. Let me explain how the appointment process goes. So a defendant is served with a criminal complaint. They have an initial appearance. And if they're in custody, the public defender's office will evaluate them, even if they're not in custody. But the public defender's office will evaluate them and ask about their income. And that is to determine if they qualify for a publicly appointed attorney. And if it does, a full-time staff, when I say a full-time staff public defender, the public defender that's appointed to them usually is an employee of the government. Usually this will happen that a government employee, a government public defender will be appointed to represent them if they're lucky. Now, if they're unlucky, the state public defender's office might be ethically prohibited from representing them. There might be a conflict. Usually this happens when there is co-defendants, because the state public defender's office can't represent co-defendants in the same time. They'd be conflicted out of that. So what happens to these folks who qualify for a public defender, but the public defender's office is ethically conflicted out of representing them? Well, they hire someone like me, a private attorney who sometimes accepts public defender appointments. The problem is, though, that public defender cases for private attorneys pay less than half of the private rate. So for decades in Wisconsin, the rate was locked at $40 an hour, which to a lot of folks here, I understand that $40 an hour might seem like a good wage. And I mean, for all intents and purposes, it is a good wage. But for an attorney, someone who's gone through law school, has established a practice and specialized in this area of high demand, that's not very much. So the rate was locked at $40 an hour from 1995 to around 2018 or 2019. And in 2019, the rate was increased from $40 to $70 an hour. For comparison, attorneys in private practice can charge private clients $300 to $350 per hour. So in response to the Brown County lawsuit, the private bar public defender rate was increased to $100 per hour, which is where it stands right now. Now keep in mind, $100 an hour, there's overhead, there's a lot of things that come out of that, so it doesn't all go in the attorney's pocket. So it's $100 right now, but it's clear that this pay raise did not solve the underlying problems of getting people represented. Now, full disclosure again, I personally do accept contract public defender work as a private attorney. So I do have an interest in getting the rate raised myself, but it's still way too low. And that's not just borne out by, hey, Patrick McFarland is standing up here and saying, I want to be paid more. No, it's these people still aren't getting appointed counsel because it's really hard to attract private attorneys to accept public cases and to accept a third of the pay they would get otherwise. But in preparation for my speech here tonight, I spoke with Katie York, and she's the head of Wisconsin State Public Defender System. I also spoke with Adam Plotkin, and he's the State Public Defender's legislative liaison, so he's worked on this pretty extensively. We discussed that the public defender rate is not the only issue that comes into play here. As you'd expect, the backups in the system and getting people appointed stem from several problems that people in this room, libertarians, know all too well. One is overcriminalization. There's always more crimes going on the books, and there's never crimes coming off the books. One of them is victimless crimes. I mean, we talk about that all the time as libertarians. We know that all too well because we're uniquely settled in this understanding of property rights. But the biggest crime that Wisconsinites are being charged with, that's a victimless crime, aside from drug possession, is bail jumping. And I don't know how many of you folks are familiar with this concept of bail jumping is. People are brought into court, there's a case pending, there's certain conditions put on them that they have to obey while their case is pending. And if they don't abide by those conditions, it's a new criminal offense. So if you get new charges, or if you have contact with someone you're not supposed to have contact with, or if you just don't show up to court, you get hit with a bail jumping charge. The other thing is district attorneys overcharging. Now, you would understand basically district attorneys have a broad range of discretion in deciding which charges that they personally, in their judgment, would like to bring. While all the cards are stacked in their favor, and people who've ever been charged with an offense will understand this, is that when you're facing 15 felony counts, and the DA says, okay, well, you plead to 2 of them and I'll dismiss the rest, you don't want to go to trial and risk getting the conviction on the 15 counts. You'll take the 2 counts and take whatever's being offered to you. So the DAs get overconfident because all the cards are stacked in their favor, and the impetus is to settle the case. So they overcharge things because they know they have to prove, they don't really have to prove it unless someone takes it to trial, which is a huge risk. The other thing, of course, as we discussed, is the lack of funding, the lack of DA's offices and of public defenders to attract and retain talent because they can't pay very much. The other thing is that attorneys are dying and they're retiring, and no one is coming in to replace them. I don't know if you've heard about this crisis of competence. It's something that's being discussed, but I don't know if that's just kind of a boomer thing of people shaking their fist at the sky and saying like, oh, well, young people, they're just, they're not competent, they're not doing what we did back in our day. I don't know, but the truth is that in rural counties especially, attorneys aren't coming. Young folks aren't coming. I said at my practice, and I'm the youngest attorney in my county, maybe the tri-county area of where I practice. I think the next oldest attorney is maybe 40 years old. So all these attorneys are dying or retiring, and no one's coming in to replace them. So we have all of those problems. On the public defender side. But in 2023, another long-festering problem challenged the Wisconsin judicial system when several counties struggled to staff their respective district attorney's offices. Dodge County, Wisconsin was infamously left without any prosecutors. Now, maybe you would think that this is a great thing. In some instances, yes, it certainly is. But in other instances, you also have to think of the rights that victims have for real legitimate crimes. And you have to think about this idea of anarcho-tyranny, okay? So when the state monopolizes something like the provision of justice, what happens if they do a really terrible job, right? I mean, it's unacceptable, because if you're a victim of a crime, you have rights too. This year, it was Rusk County, Wisconsin that doesn't have any prosecutors. So as a criminal defense attorney, I certainly, it's not the worst thing ever, but it causes problems in of itself. But to be fair, the legislature did address these problems by increasing the pay. I alluded to it before, from 70 to 100. But there were raises for staff public defenders as well, and raises for prosecutors. The one thing they can offer that I don't have myself is the benefits package of the state retirement system. But these increases in the pay rates, they treated the symptoms and not the underlying cause. And that's something, as libertarians, we certainly understand the seen and the unseen effects, Bastiat's lesson, Frederick Bastiat. These problems are systemic, and only we have the solution, because we truly understand it as libertarians. Now, I understand that some of us, including me, believe that the government is an unnecessary evil and not a necessary evil. However, the reality is that the government has monopolized these fundamental societal functions. And if the government is the only source that people have to enforce their rights and to provide justice, it better damn well be doing its job. In 1959, Murray Rothbard wrote a letter to Kenneth Templeton. And in that letter he said, "I'm getting more and more convinced that the war-peace question is the key to the whole libertarian business." And Murray Rothbard was right. It is the pursuit of empire that causes our liberties to die at home. From the Federal Reserve being created to fund war in the first place, central banking, to the police state, to nuclear brinksmanship. War and peace is the key to the whole libertarian business. And we've seen this as we've sent billions and billions of dollars abroad. We've spent our policy provoking proxy wars abroad. And meanwhile, our fundamental infrastructure at home is crumbling. As libertarians, again, we uniquely understand this. So as we sit here and watch America descend further into dystopia, the responsibility falls on us to take action. So thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here tonight.
Stay tuned after the Q&A, because we got a liquor sale coming up with Phil.
Who?
So,
Phil's selling liquor?
Yes. Can't believe it.
Wait, question and answer, and then drinks, then drinks. Yeah, let's give us another drink in our hand while we're getting your drinks, right?
Yeah, after all, we got a bar bill to meet. You can open those bottles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michael, drinks, get the boots flowing.
Yeah.
You alluded to the disparity in compensation for public defenders. And I get that entirely, because I practice medicine, and the exact same thing happens in my profession, especially in rural areas. The urban areas don't have this issue. They've got tax base, that they're able to absorb that and compensate appropriately. And yes, I know, people go, oh, $100 an hour? That should be really wonderful, except that when you spend X amount of money to get to your educational level and experience to do that, it really isn't when you look at the market outside. We could go elsewhere. We could go to Chicago. We could go to Minneapolis. We could go to New York and make double what we make here in rural Wisconsin.
Right.
So I understand that. Do you see a pathway to improving that in rural Wisconsin?
I think that firstly the question, so the rate is set statewide. So there isn't necessarily a disparity in rural and urban counties with public defender cases specifically. I think that when it comes to the private rate that I can charge in my small town is not the rate that I could charge in Milwaukee or the Twin Cities per se. So, but the question fundamentally is, how do we attract talent to these areas? And I think as libertarians, we know that professional licensure certainly drives up the cost. But I think the problem, lowering the barriers to entry into the profession itself, but the issue is that Wisconsin is one of maybe the 2 or 3 states in the entire nation that allows diploma privilege for law. Yep. And so that is an interesting conundrum. I don't necessarily know. I think it's a cultural issue. It's that people should, maybe professionals should do a better job of trying to foster interest in the legal profession. I mean, and you would think maybe that going forward, people would identify that there's a huge gap in the need for services. And it's not just criminal defense work either. It's that people in rural counties, you've heard about like grocery deserts, right? Have you food deserts like that? There's legal deserts out there. And I think the legal infrastructure is just as important as the food, infrastructure, because you're talking about fundamental societal functions.
Follow up very quickly. I don't know if everybody in this room understands the uniqueness of Wisconsin as one of the few states that has diploma bar.
Yeah. If you, just to clarify that, in Wisconsin, if you graduate from Wisconsin Law School, you can go right into practice. You don't have to take the bar exam. Sorry, Mike.
No, I understood that. I just want to make sure that.
Oh, right. But did you have a follow-up on that?
No, that,
okay.
I just want that clarified.
Okay. Any other questions or anything like that? I got paint on my hands from this podium. Black. All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We have this nice gift bag for you.
Oh, wonderful.
It's a medley of good libertarian stuff.
Yeah, awesome.
And there's coins in there too.
Oh, there is, okay.
And some other things in that sort. And we have this nice gift bag for you too. Thank you very much. Thank you to our guests. It is now the hour to party on. Phil, you got a special presentation.
It was not. Your tinnitus is way worse than.
All eyes on Phil.
We're gonna have to get out on the live stream later.
Your microphone.
I make wine and beer, and then other members
Drink it.
Yeah.
Live streaming and that.
Put together a little pack.
Oh, so I think that's
A little bit about them. And then if you would offer some
Any
money
raw
for that,
footage that you want to send us?
I can kill it. It's fine. Nobody else
So-
can speak on the mic.
First of all, this beautiful bottle of Drambuie. Who knows what Drambuie is?